Hello, everyone. Today is Friday, November 13th. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Today, we'll be talking about what do we want to buy now. And there's a lot of tie ins between this episode and previous episode, What Do We Do Now? The idea is virtually the same. Some things have changed, the market has changed a little bit. So today, we'll kind of talk about that. We'll see what the market looks like, what's changed from before, and what do we want to do as the year rounds itself out. So with that, we'll hop right in. So I would advise anyone who's listening to this, go back and watch my previous video titled What Do We Do Now? It basically summarizes a lot of the ideas that we want to emphasize and focus on when it comes to predicting possible trends for the future. And I say this because one of the most important things I stressed about in that video is trying to analyze what is the next best thing. What do we want to do to try and prepare ourselves for the direction the market may head in the future. So we have to think about future scenarios, and one of the best ways to do this, as I mentioned countless times in my videos, is that when you're thinking about the future scenario, when you're trying to predict what the market will do in the future, one of the biggest advantages you can learn and the most amount of information you can get is having a clear understanding of what is happening in the real world with economics, how the economy is doing, how people are doing. All these things do ultimately come back and tie themselves to the hobby industry. It's just one part of many people's lives, but depending on where they are financially, what their job looks like, what the prospect looks like for the future, for the upcoming quarter, for the upcoming 6 months to a year, it'll change their spending habits. When it changes their spending habits, it'll change what the market looks like based on what people are buying. And when you have a lot of people who are impacted by the same economic policies, by what's happening with the economy, then we really get a clear understanding of what the big picture looks like and what the market will shift in which direction, up or down, depending on ultimately what the spending habits of individuals do look like. So looking at the real world right now, one of the things that we have noted, I did mention this earlier in the week, Monday was a big day for the market. The market had rallied behind the results of the election and the possibility that Pfizer is now coming out with a vaccine that they theorize is 90% effective. And this really could be a big deal, especially with what we're seeing in COVID cases, regardless of your feelings about how the pandemic is being handled, the directions that states are taking, policies are being adapted, all that. You can't deny that there's a lot of COVID cases. We are seeing a record number of growing COVID cases, and this is going to be something that will impact us until we have a clear vaccine, until we have some definitive plan as the year rounds out. And as we mentioned time and time before, the pandemic is really something that has permeated into every aspect of our society, of our lives, financially, socially, economically, etc. All these things do come into play, and the pandemic is something that most of us have had to adapt to. It's not something that is going to disappear. It's not something that is going to go away overnight. It's not like we magically transition from 2020 to 2021 and everything's fine and dandy and it's all an upswing. That's not going to be the case. The most realistic outcome is we are going to see a slow transition. We are going to see, if a vaccine does come out, for example, we're going to see it slowly being adopted, and depending on how efficient it is, how practical it is, how well it works, how many people decide to use it, I imagine that it will be a slow, progressive transition into what would look like normalcy as we know it from 2019. It's not going to be quick. If you listen to the interview with Mason Berry the other day from Cardinal Gaming, he had mentioned that his store has likely permanently changed as a result of the pandemic. And what that means is that play spaces, he mentioned that they were previously able to sit have 100 people in the store for events, kind of bigger events such as regionals, etc. it's very well possible that that may be a normal that we don't ever see again. And he mentioned in the video, in the interview, and I think a lot of stores have also adopted this, play space is likely to be reduced in the future. We're likely going to see less seats available inside stores because the stores that have remained open, they have likely shifted away from having a lot of square footage dedicated to tables and to gaming space, especially now and probably within the upcoming several months. If people aren't sitting down and playing, if people aren't gathering for events, that space could be better used elsewhere. And it wouldn't surprise me if, as we slowly transition and people start feeling comfortable about going back to their game store, about going back to real life events, etc., it wouldn't surprise me that, like Mason mentioned, a lot of these stores probably may never go back to having their original seating size if they were able to utilize that space for something better. Maybe they expand their retail, they add more shelving, they have more product on display now that they can have sit there instead of having an empty table. A lot of stores may realize that this is probably an acceptable permanent fixture. This is something that we're okay with. We're okay having the shelf be here permanently. We're okay with this extra gondola for displaying items be here permanently instead of having these big play spaces which may not be used to capacity most of the time. Because realistically, most stores, they can sit far more than the amount of people they usually have in the store. If you think about during the weekdays when things are a little bit slower, most stores probably operate anywhere from what I've seen, from what the stores I've been to during the middle of the week, most stores probably are operating at anywhere from 30 to 50 to 60% capacity. Usually stores get a little bit more full on Friday, on Saturday when people are out playing, people are attending events. At those points, we probably do see closer to maybe 80%, and only do we really use all the table space for big events, usually regionals, premier level events that occur inside stores, those types of things when every bit of seating is used. So if we do see kind of this transition away, we do have to plan and take a look at what's happening. And for this, I do reference kind of the real world again, having an understanding of the stock market. This is something that I've mentioned time and time again. It's absolutely valuable if you really want to get ahead, especially when it comes to investing. And if we take a look, there's two sides to the story. It's very easy to take a look at one side and have a misguided sense as to what's happening with the other. As mentioned, the stock market on Monday, it saw a pretty big rise. It did very well coming off the back of the Pfizer vaccine announcement. It's cooled off a little bit since, but it's definitely rallied within the past day, and it's definitely rallied, and experts are saying that this economic growth is probably here to stay. The results of election, the Pfizer vaccine, all these things are likely going to be ultimately a boom for the economy, and this is something that we can look forward to. For the most part, stocks are up across the board. Disney reported recently their financial year had closed. They reported their first year where they experienced financial loss in 40 years, which is a big deal. That being said, this is also the first time we've had a global pandemic in more than 40 years. So it's unsurprising that times have really changed. What the market looks like is going to be very different than what it has been in the past. That being said, Disney also reported that based on the current global state, depending on what's happening with the pandemic right now, they actually saw their quarterly performance exceed their expectations for its time. Clearly, they're doing well at things like Disney Plus, their streaming, presumably their revenue from people buying toys. All these things have done well for them, so them being ahead does show promise. It does show an upswing in the economy, as it were. A lot of other companies have also reported doing well. The Dow Jones, NASDAQ, S&P 500, all these stock indexes are up. Cisco, another big company, their financial year was also closing recently, I believe. They also reported a huge upswing in their stocks. For the most part, companies have done well this year, and it shows that the companies that were able to adapt, that they were able to change their policies, change how they did business, have succeeded. Walmart has seen a 5% increase year over year. This is roughly on par with what they've done in the past. Usually they do experience kind of that single digit growth, and Walmart, being the giant that it is, they're likely to have things in place that would insulate them relatively well from the pandemic, and they're probably able to do things that makes it relatively easy for them in the middle of a pandemic, and they probably don't get hit as hard as some other places like retail hobby shops, as Mason kind of discussed in his interview the other day. Amazon saw a 40% increase year over year with this past closing quarter. And I realize that most people, Amazon, probably not the most popular thing, but it is very, very difficult to not deny that Amazon has really provided a service to people, for the people who can afford it, that has really helped carry people through this pandemic. The fact that they offer, if you live in an area with a Whole Foods, for example, having a groceries delivered via Prime, very, very efficient. For me, I know that I use Amazon Business. I've been able to purchase a lot of things. It's really negated my need to go out and go to office supply stores to be restocking on things when I could just have it. And when I know I'm getting low on stock on something, I just order Amazon and it comes to my house. It's much easier, and that really allows me to minimize my exposure to the outside when I can avoid it. So Amazon, no surprise that they've done very well there. We do expect that with Black Friday coming around, we've discussed this several times. Black Friday is just around the corner. We're probably looking at 2 Fridays from today would be Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving would be 2 days from yesterday. It's going to be another huge sales boon. A lot of stores, a lot of retail operations, no matter what they are going to be competing for your business on Black Friday. I think that just looking forward, trying to have a game plan of how much money you can afford to budget, how much money you want to be spending. Some of it maybe if you want to try and get a little bit ahead on the market for personal use, to try and make the hobby cheaper because you want to be buying things now when there's a potential for a sale versus down the line when they may be getting more expensive. I think that's a very, very valid strategy going into Black Friday. And we'll kind of transition into the last kind of topics here in this episode. But all these things, as the year starts to close, it's really going to start speeding up. And a lot of stores, they know this. A lot of retail operations, they know this. They know that Black Friday is usually the single best sales day for them in the entire year. With industries that have been hurting in retail, especially local game stores, especially stores in the hobby industry, they are really going to be looking to try and get sales from you during that time because there's so much competition. They know that if they're able to get out there, they're able to market their products, they're able to sell themselves and make that revenue during this small period of time. That's going to be a huge boon for them as the year closes, because once it gets past December, once we get past the holiday season, January, February, March, those are generally slower months until people start to see their tax returns again. Usually those are slower months for retail as well. And with the current state of where we are this year, I do expect that this January and February will be particularly rough for a lot of retail operations. If they haven't already been suffering already, they may see some tribulations there. So the end of this month, figure out how much money you want to spend, buy it. It is possible that the stimulus check, from what it looks like at this time, we may not possibly see a stimulus check for the remainder of this year. I think there's too little time for that to really come into effect. And with the current political climate in the United States, it's possible that for most of us, that stimulus check is going to be pushed off until next year, assuming it goes through without a hitch, which clearly is not going to be the case, because we know right now there's a lot of back and forth between both parties about about the funding for this, how much that they're going to distribute. Until we really see that come into play next year, a lot of people probably will be struggling. If they're already struggling, I think it's going to be an even harder time, especially with the holidays coming up. If that stimulus check doesn't hit until January or February, it may be a tough time for a lot of people. And I think that tying all this together, seeing how everything is doing, is going to help us guide our decision on what we should do, especially now. As mentioned, with the year closing, a lot of money is going to be out there. People are going to be trying to spend their money. People are going to be needing money. this is a good opportunity for you to buy. If you look across the board, there seems to be a kind of growing trend. I think people are starting to realize that Pokemon is starting to cool off. We're no longer seeing these spikes that are just competing each other to see which card can spike the hardest, which card can sell for the most money. We're kind of trending away from this point, and I think that this is to be expected. We can't have sales topping sales, topping sales, topping sales month after month. That's just not realistic. That's not how the market works, because we know that when things trend up this much, there's going to be a huge surge of people entering the market. There's going to be a lot of people trying to sell off their cards. A lot of people, as mentioned, if they went back and they dug out their cards from their closet, they found their old collections. I've seen so many of them come through. A lot of people are happy to take their windfall. This is something that they didn't realize they had. They came across a small sum of money. They're happy to cash out, sell their cards, be done with it. They don't really care about what Pokemon looks like in the next few months. They're just happy with getting out with the money that they had that they didn't have before. And I think that as the year starts to close, as people continue to discover how well Pokemon is doing, it's still gaining a lot of visibility. There's still a lot of eyes on it. People are going to be selling off their extra cards, and there's a multitude of reasons for this. The most common reason we see, especially now more than ever, and this is something I've discussed time and time again, and I think it's especially relevant now that it's really starting to pick up, is people are going to want to be selling off their extra cards. And the biggest reason is people need money for the holidays. Whether they're going to try and travel, they need money for a plane ticket to go see their family, whether they just need money for gifts, if they've been struggling financially, it's really coming down to crunch time for a lot of people. A lot of people, if they've been on unemployment or whatever, a lot of their benefits may have worn off already. That supplemental income that's coming in starting to wear off. So it becomes harder. And usually the first thing that people do is try and cash out on their hobbies and collectibles. People start to dig through. People realize that, do I really need this highest rarity card if I'm not going to really be playing? Or can I just sell my high rarity cards that have that premium and just go back and get the most basic version? That way I still have the option to play, but I don't need to have the extra money sitting around when I may not get full use out of it. So usually, most of the time, we'll see people cash out. I think this is something that has occurred in the past. I see it every year around the holidays. People always need that money. People realize that it's crunch time. I need to get rid of my extra stuff. Time to sell. If we look at PWCC, I think that the auctions will be going up in 2 days. So the Pokemon cycle, I believe this month, I'm going to pull it up here, is ending on it'll start on the 15th, so in 2 days, and it lasts 10 days, so it'll end on the 25th. For this particular cycle of Pokemon, there are almost 3,000 listings for cards. This is higher than the past few months, and this is really going to show that there's a lot of people who had clearly got their cards graded towards the beginning of the spike that's happening. People were excited to go out. They got their cards graded. Anything that they think they could make money on, they went out and got graded. And I'm just going to reference back to what Mason said. I think the interview was really great. If you haven't listened to it, go check it out. He said that it's so easy for people with how hot the market is, with how much demand there is out there. People are going out there, they're buying cards, and they're getting them graded because it's very easy to get cards graded. If you know what you're doing, get the cards graded, send them out. If you only have a few cards, pay the premium to get them back quickly, as opposed to a bulk submission where you're going to be waiting for who knows how long for PSA or Beckett to get their cards back to you. Send them out quickly, get them back, and just turn around and sell them. And usually most of these cards, if they have value to them, if they were something that people were wanting beforehand and there was demand, a graded version that comes back as a 9 or a 10, you could easily be doubling, tripling, quadrupling, getting 10 times return on your money if it comes back particularly nice on some of the rarer cards. And this is something that people are doing, and it makes sense that if they got them back, they would want to get them into PWCC in time for this month's cycle, to get the submissions out and to get these cards listed and sold. So we do see a lot of items. 3,000 items is no shortage of items that are on the market. I'm just scrolling through here. Some of the things that I mentioned. there's a lot of things to keep your eye on. I think that if you are a buyer, this month in the PWCC cycle is probably among the one of the best times to do so, because there's just simply so many items that are available on here, and there's a lot of motivation for people to sell. And when there's this much, things are going to slip through the cracks. I think that people are going to be focusing on big ticket items. I think it's very, very easy to get in and try and snipe some smaller items, some cheaper items that there's not a lot of attention on, because people are always going to be focusing on big items that have a lot of visibility, kind of the premium blue chip pieces that people generally want to be spending their money into. And looking just at the blue chip pieces, if I scroll down here, and I think I want to be looking at the second page on the PWCC, I'm just looking at the PWCC, I'm looking at the auction marketplace tab. These items, they're technically not up on eBay yet. They're simply doing previews for the items, so you actually can't click on the item itself. All you see is the year, the title, and the grade. That's usually what you see, but you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on. If I scroll down on page 2 on their website, I see that for Charizard, just looking at it, I have a Shadowless signed, an unlimited Chinese BGS 9, French BGS 8.5, all first edition except for the Chinese unlimited one. So first edition French 8.5, first edition German 8.5, and then first edition Shadowless, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There's 13 total, including a PSA 10 on here. So that's really the biggest item. That's the one that probably will have the most visibility. We'll see how that one does. If you go beyond that, there's another bunch of listings for Shadowless versions, and then a bunch of listings for unlimited versions after that. And that actually extends from page 2 on to page 3. So this is just one example, but you can see people are really getting out there and putting their cards on the market. And when this happens, if we just go by the age-old mantra, Warren Buffett, he said it before, I said it before, I'll say it again. When people are selling, that is the time for you to buy. And then when people are buying, that is when you should be selling. Right now, it does seem like people are not, I shouldn't say people aren't confident in the market. I'm not saying that people are scared of the direction that Pokemon is going. All I'm saying is that there's a huge surplus right now. There's going to be a lot of competition. If we look at all these Charizards, there's a huge range on them. They're on conditions. So maybe you can't necessarily afford to shell out for the PSA 10, the PSA 9, the PSA 8. The spread is too big. The spread is too big. But if you want something cheaper, maybe you're okay with a Shadowless version, you're okay with an unlimited version, these are out there for you. So I think that anyone who's looking to buy, this is a good time, as mentioned, to get in. You can really stretch your dollar because people are going to be motivated to sell. If we look at the Facebook groups, if we look at some of the other marketplaces where people are trying to sell their cards, there's a lot of people selling right now. And that's something that you can use to work against other people, especially when people are motivated to sell, especially if they need the money. I know it sounds cruel to be taking advantage of someone who may be in a financial bind, but it's okay to walk away from a deal. If someone wants too much for their cards, just say, hey, that's okay. You can keep your cards. I'm going to go find deals elsewhere, because we know those deals will be abound. I mentioned this before. Usually when I do the PWCC videos, a lot of times you can find cards that people aren't necessarily paying attention to. If I scroll, I scroll down a little bit. I looked at the third page. We're looking at Gyarados. So I see a bunch of listings for first edition. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 total. There's 2 PSA Gem Mints, first edition. So those people are always going to be excited about. I understand, because people want the best of the best, that people can afford to do so. But it's very possible there's 8s, there's 9s that do sneak by. People may not be as interested in those because everyone has their eyes focused on 10. Sometimes you can get in, you can just throw out a bid, and sometimes you do win these. I've won plenty of items from PWCC that I felt like were underpriced. Demand isn't necessarily there. Liquidity may be an issue because it's not that 10, it's not that really big number that people like. But a lot of these items, given enough time, they'll sell. And with as many as there are right now, if people have more choices on what they want to buy, it's very possible that you can sneak in there and you can get a deal. So that's something to consider. There's a lot of cards on here. I actually haven't gone through all these myself. I've just gone through the first few pages just to look at the base set stuff because that's really the biggest stuff right now. But I do imagine that there's going to be all your usual culprits of jungle, fossil, WotC era, all the way up to modern era cards. I'm actually going to the end. Usually I want to see what the most recent cards are that people have on here. I see people grading Japanese Sword and Shield. There's a Black Label Charizard VMAX Japanese. So people are grading relatively recent stuff. I see the Charizard V from Champions Path. There's 3 9.5 Gem Mints BGS on here. So there's some newer cards on there. There's really something here for everyone. And as mentioned, people are motivated to sell. If you can afford it, this is probably going to be your best time to buy before the market rebounds again. I think that there are a lot of things that will continue to pressure the prices upwards. Sealed product will continue to do well. I know that we've had some scares. There's been some people who have had to deal with opening counterfeit boxes, fake boxes. If you go back, you look at the dumb money. We mentioned that in the past. That was a $375,000 base set booster box. They opened it and it was resealed. So that was a problem. I know that that scares some potential people away from the market. I think there's always going to be some concern when you're spending a lot of money on the big boxes. Those are going to be the most likely targets for people to try and scam. Not necessarily you, but just try and pull a scam with. So when we think about the next best thing, I think there's a lot of room for various boxes to grow. Yesterday, we did mention that there is some concern with newer boxes. We know that there's a reprint for Cosmic Eclipse coming. That's one of the more popular boxes. That's a box that has done very well. It's well above retail. We're looking probably about $200 plus for the box. Maybe it's come down a little bit since the reprint has been announced, but there are a lot of boxes that still do well. If we look at the XY era boxes, I've mentioned this in the past time and time again. I think that is one of those boxes that does show a lot of promise. They haven't really exploded in the way some of the older boxes have because it's relatively new. XY, we're looking at 2014, 2015, relatively recent for some of these eras. So there's a fair amount of it out there. Evolutions, that one popped, already part of the XY series. It wouldn't surprise me if people start trending towards XY because it's relatively affordable compared to the era before, the black-white era, when a lot of those boxes have gone really expensive. Plasma Storm, one of the more popular ones, we're probably looking at $4,000 to $5,000 for that box. That does contain the secret rare Charizard, so there's a lot of demand. Those boxes are getting pretty hard to find. Even XY boxes are slowly starting to dry up on the market. And as soon as they disappear, that's going to be when the prices ignite, as it were. And because people are going to start listing them, people aren't going, if they sell out at 400 and we don't see many copies available on the market, the people who are listing them aren't going to be listing them for 500. They're probably going to list them for 1,000. And as soon as that happens, that's really going to cause a massive run on the market. So thinking about next best thing, trying to buy sooner rather than later is going to be something to your advantage. And as I mentioned, with as many people trying to sell out right now because they think that the market's going to be at peak, I think this is the time to buy. I know I'm going to be buying. I'm going to try and spend as much money on Pokemon within the next month or so as possible, trying to find as many good deals with people trying to sell out their inventory. So opportunities there. You just have to go out and look for it. You have to be okay saying no. There will be more opportunities for you to buy if you have a limited budget. Don't feel like you need to be going out and buying everything. There will always be another opportunity. You just have to make the best of your money with what you have, trying to find the best opportunity you can get. This Sunday, Steve Aoki, I mentioned him in the past, he was opening up a card store in Hollywood, California, really trying to cater to the high-end level of collectability. Very high-end sports cards there. I think their website says they have something like $2 million inventory, which is high-end product. Inside the store, there's going to be a lot of valuable things, sports memorabilia, Pokemon, etc. Then he recently announced this Sunday he is doing an opening on Twitch. It seems like he does name drop a lot of big celebrities who are into this. All these celebrities on Twitch, streamed live. I think he's selling off the packs to a charitable foundation for him. All these things is just going to be another flashpoint in the pan, and that's really going to get people excited. People who love EDM, for example, we're not drawing a different group of people. First, we had people coming in from Logic's fan base, people who were following up on that, people who are wanting to buy there, and now we're drawing in a different fan base. People who like Logic, may not necessarily be EDM people who may not be listening to EDM music, but now Steve Aoki, people who follow him, check out his stuff. Maybe they see something there. Maybe they see that, hey, Pokemon, what's going on here? This is something that's worth coming in and taking a look at and investigating. And there may be something that is. I'm sorry, there's someone at the door. I just want to see what's going on. Okay. Irrelevant. Marketer. All these things I just want to um, draw attention to, because now that I'm gonna have to reform my thought. I'm sorry. Steve Aoki doing that live stream for his boxes. Now he's drawing in a new crowd of people, and if these new people that are entering the market take notice of this, it's just going to be another opportunity for people to get in, maybe draw a new group of people that come in who have interest in Pokemon again. And this is only going to do something that is going to further perpetuate the growth of Pokemon within the next few months. And there's not really a better time, I think, for Pokemon, for the community, to see more people get in than right now. So I think all this is just going to be kind of a good way to round out the year. And with the people who are coming in, it's going to provide a lot of opportunity for people who are already in the market. And at the end of the day, when it comes to investing, when it comes to spending money, when it comes to trying to maximize your profits as a retail owner, that's what you want. You want a growth. You want to know that there's good, healthy growth inside the community, that there's a lot of people who are coming in. There's a lot of negativity that happens in the community that goes with every community once it gets to this size. But being there, being part of the community, being able to take advantage of the opportunities here is going to be something that would be beneficial for you, especially as the year rounds itself out and we're looking forward into 2021. So that's a wrap on today's episode. As always, thank you for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. Next week, I will be out of town for Monday and Tuesdays, so it's unlikely there will be any recordings on those days. Definitely not on Tuesday. Tuesday is my day that I'm coming back here to Portland. It's possible that we may not see an episode till Wednesday. Monday, I may try and do a stream remote. It would be on my laptop. I don't know if I have the bandwidth to be able to do a stream direct to YouTube. We'll have to see how that goes. So no promises on Monday. But with that, have a good weekend. Stay safe where you're in the world. Thanks to a lot of people who have been listening. A lot of people have been leaving feedback. I really appreciate the feedback that people have. There seems to be a lot of positive reception to the stream that Mason gave out. So thank you all for that. As mentioned, where you're in the world, stay safe. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with more.